Hey everyone! So in this next video we get to talk about ancestors, and this is always a fun piece of our mentorship because we get to travel to the other side of the veil and work with our ancestors. In the west direction, the reason we work with ancestors in this specific direction is because right around the end of October, early November, it's Samhain, which is the Celtic holiday. And that is a really important time in the Celtic calendar because the veil is so thin between the worlds that it makes it very accessible to work with our ancestors. And the other time period that also works is right at this spring, when we go from spring into summer, which is Beltane. And that's another time when the veil is very thin. So we work with that energy for a lot of different reasons, and one is to create healing among the DNA and the genetic lines. The other reason is to just simply work with our ancestors and to learn from them. There are different kinds of ancestors. We have land ancestors, so the ancestors of the trees, the stones, the water, and even the ancestors of like the whales and dolphins and different creatures that are very ancient here on Earth. And so we can work with those energies and really kind of get some clarity on different things and work with that energy to apply it to our lives. We also can work with the actual DNA type ancestors, so our great grandparents, our those who are in our biological line. And one of the things that science is discovering is that we have an ability to pass memories down through our DNA. So sometimes when you find that you can do something that you don't have to go through a lot of training to do it, like painting or playing the piano or something like that, that can actually be a memory that has been passed down through the DNA of your ancestors. Same thing with phobias and fears. If you have like an irrational fear of anything, that could be something that is passed down through your DNA. One thing I found really interesting when I was in Ireland, I used to do a lot of public speaking and energy type seminars where I would show people how powerful energy is. And on one particular conference that I did, I had an audience of about 60 people. And one of the things that I used to love to do was to show people the power of a group energetic field. And so I would take people through the group. I would take them through. I'd take 7 people. I'd take like 10% of the sum total of the group, and those 7 people, this particular one I did 7 people because there were about 60 to 70 people in the total audience, and I would show them pictures and influence them. All they had to do was look at pictures, nothing more than that. And then I would go through the audience and I would test them through kinesiology. You can do some muscle testing, is what it's also called. And you can ascertain whether somebody is strong or weak, their energetic level. And what I would do is I would show pictures that were not pretty, and the audience would completely go weak. And the audience does not see these pictures. And then I would show pictures that depicted something happy, and they would then again be strong. So what this showed was the power that a very small fraction of people would have on an entire audience. So this particular group that I did, since I was in Ireland, I decided to show the initial 7 people photos of the potato famine, which happened in the 1800s, and millions of people died in that particular famine. And when I showed, Avi sees a bird. Oh dear Lord. when I showed these photos to this group of 7 people, they had an immediate, very, very visceral, strong reaction. See the tail? And the reaction was this deep sorrow and pain, and what it was doing, it was invoking a memory of their ancestors in the DNA. And one of the ironic things that I noticed in Ireland is that, well, 2 things. Well, just one thing. And that is that there's a large amount of people in Ireland who are challenged by obesity. And one of the theories that I kind of have is that, and we have that here in America too, is that it was because the DNA was affected by the memory, that there's this part of them that wants to hold on, or make sure that they're fed, and that there's plenty there, instead of having to starve. And I was always struck by that particular group of people when I took them through that, because they were so tied into that memory. And when I asked them, what was the feeling that you had when you saw the pictures, for many of them it was, they said, I don't know why I felt the way that I did, but I felt this extreme fear. I felt like I wasn't going to have enough. And that a couple people actually said that I felt like I was about to die on the inside out. And so when we have those memories from our ancestors, and if there's not that conscious awareness of where something, a fear or particular whatever comes through, when you don't have the awareness that is coming from an ancestor, it's really hard to heal, if it needs healing, or have an understanding or an awareness or whatever it might be. But when we actually actively go in and work with our ancestors and tap into that energy, we bring through that lineage this incredible healing. Because remember, like in the quantum field and in a shamanic field, time is not linear like we in this third dimensional ego body. We make time linear. There's past, present, future. But in truth, at least from everything that I've studied, in truth, it's time is happening simultaneously, and so you've got all of this past generations, things that are happening right now, as well as in the future, and you've got all these alternate realities, these parallel universes, and so everything's kind of, think of it as like stacked on top of each other. So what we do in this lifetime has a direct influence on what we perceive as the past and what we perceive as the future. And having that direct influence then allows you to, somebody wants to pet Navi. You've got that influence that you can ultimately change the course of time. You literally can change the course of time. And that's a very powerful tool that we can tap into. You can do a lot of really amazing healing through this avenue. Another way that it kind of has shown up for me in a roundabout way is that my grandmother was very, very fearful of water, because she actually she witnessed her baby sister drown when she was about 2 years old. And she passed that fear down to my mom. My mom never learned how to swim. She was always very afraid of water. And my mom passed that down to me. And so that was a generational fear that got passed on over time. And until I started doing some of my own healing work and really trying to tap into, why am I so scared of water? Because it really didn't make sense to me. Why is mom so scared of water? And turns out, I kind of traced it back and I was able to heal it. Now, that was very easy to heal because my mom and my grandmother, were both alive at the time. So that made it very easy. But we don't always have that access when we haven't, had direct influence or contact with, say, our 65th great-grandfather, And when you think about some of the things that our ancestors have experienced and endured, and, even just the way that their lives were, and you can kind of see how that influences where we are today. Huge trauma in somebody's life is almost certainly going to be passed down into the DNA because it has such a powerful, strong influence. And so we want to be able to just clean that up so that we don't keep perpetuating it in future generations. The other type of ancestors that we can work with are indigenous ancestors who we feel an affinity towards. Many of us who are following the shamanic path have a very strong, undeniable connection to Native Americans or to the Celts or to the African shamans. And maybe there's not a conscious idea or knowing about why we have that affinity. It could be because we've had a past life as that indigenous tribe, and therefore we've got those ancestors that we can work with as well. When I was doing a lot of work with my guides, I had this guide that kept showing up, and very strong Celtic influence. And the more that I worked with this energy, the more palpable it became. Now fast forward about 8-10 years, and I was given his name. It was Bran. And when I started doing my genealogy, I traced my father's side, which is a side of the family that I never really had any interest in whatsoever. But once I got past my grandfather, I learned that my entire lineage, there's a line that we're all kings and queens of Ireland. And there's a dog now. Yeah. This is the Dakota Mommy show, apparently. So what I discovered was that my 65th great-grandfather was Bran the Blessed, and he was a bard, a druid. So it was, when I saw that at my genealogy, there was this knowing, and one, because of the name, obviously, but then it all clued into me why I was so tied into the Celts and so drawn to the Druidry. And Ireland, when I first went to Ireland, I'll never forget the feeling that I had where I just, and it happened in Scotland too, I felt like I had finally come home, that it was in my soul. And it was a feeling I can't describe adequately because it was so deep and so intrinsic. But when I did my genealogy and I realized just how long my family has been in those parts, and actually it was my, I think my 70th great-grandfather who founded Scotland. And so it all made sense to me that why in this lifetime, I grew up in a very non-religious home. I became religious on my own when I was a teenager, but I never had this direct influence of Irish, Scottish, Celtic, any of that. I never had any of that in my upbringing. So when I started to really tap into that, I questioned, it's like, where does this come from? And then when I did my genealogy and learned just how steeped in Ireland and Scotland my family really was, it really made sense to me that it literally is in my bones. And so now, when I go and do ancestor work, I'm mostly going and I'm tapping into my ancestors who were really kind of entrenched in that Druidry in Ireland, like true Druidry, and really, for lack of a better word, picking their brains, picking their souls. How does this play into my life? How can I use this energy? How can I take this forward and help teach others? How can I make this more accessible in my own life, but also in the lives of others? And so working with my ancestors has been a really, really deep and rich experience, just in the work that I do. So that is another reason why we want to tap into our ancestry, because there's a wealth of knowledge there. There's history, and there's a knowing that we can really capitalize on and use in our everyday life. And so doing the ancestry work, it doesn't just have to happen during the west direction. It can happen anytime. It just so happens that the west direction is a great time to do it because it's it's part of the direction. The veil is very thin. The energy is there. It's palpable, and it's something that it just is really conducive. And so as we go into here we call it Halloween, but I like to call it Samhain. As we go into Samhain, we go in with that knowing, and we really work with that energy, and then we're going to just work with it in a way that deeply enriches our soul. And so what I want you to do, I'm going to give you guys a link to a download for some questions and things that you can kind of take into a meditation and work with your guides and really ask them to come forward, and then to bring your ancestors in and ask them these questions and really find a way back to them. If you have a family, how like some diseases go from generation to generation, or they bypass a generation, even healing some of that can be done in ancestral work. So we're going to do that. You'll have a PDF download for that. I'm also going to give you an opportunity to get a discount on one of the meditations that we have for ancestors, and you can use that in your practice too if you would like. So I hope that helps you guys understand a little bit of why we go into doing ancestor work. And I would love for you guys down below, just if you've done some kind of this work, what have you learned? What have you discovered? What would you like to discover if you haven't done any of this work? And we'll see if Navi here can do some of her own little work, tapping into her ancestors of the canine, of the wolf family, I'm sure. And so have fun with it, and really let this be a force in your life to elicit some change and growth. So we have one more video in this series, and then we're going to wrap it up. It's been really beautiful process to watch you guys go through this, and just give you an opportunity to taste test a little bit of the west direction through the eyes of the medicine wheel. So we've got a lot of things that are happening over at Gaia. I would love to share it with you guys. In the next video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, and hopefully you guys will be doing even deeper work. So thanks for being here, and thanks for loving on this one. I get a lot of kudos from you guys about her. She's a good girl. All right, bye guys. It's me one more time. I am walking down the beach, and I forgot to mention the land ancestors in terms of the people who once occupied the land that we're on. And that's another very important ancestor that we can work with. because we want to heal the land, and we also want to clear away any energy that is not serving us on that land. So there's a lot of things that you can do to clear land ancestor energy if you need to, and that's a deep dive actually that we'll probably be doing here in our soul guides in a few months, so be on the lookout for that. But I just wanted to add that in there. I'm walking along the beach and heading back to the car, and I was just thinking about the indigenous tribes that used to live here on this island and in these parts in the Pacific Northwest, and then it dawned on me I didn't tell you guys about that. So anyway, there you go, and now go and do your comments down below. Bye guys.